Yeah, awesome. Well, I do see some folks jumping in, and we are glad maybe you grabbed that second cup of coffee and are now joining us for Unlocking Workforce Insight Through People Analytics. We are delighted to have our partner, another tool, a technology tool that I use every day, ADP, and we have Max Roach with us. We just heard some great insights, high level of what's going on in the profession and some of what they're seeing at ADP. But I'm going to turn it over to Max to start talking through, what can we look at in terms of people analytics? What role is that playing in our future?
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Greatly appreciate the intro there, and great to see everybody again. So, with that being said, let's just jump into it. So, quick disclaimer: I think a lot about the prior panel and Aon ADP. We're fortunate because of our size to have a lot of those, individuals and resources. As you think about our approach to data integrity, data security, ensuring our models are in compliance, ensuring that we have individuals that are sitting on Capitol Hill knowing what's happening from a regulatory perspective, like allow us and your partners at MACPA and Aon and CPA.com and RAMP to be the resource for you, for your clients. I've been doing the same presentation now for about a year, and I always ask how many organizations there in the audience have started to create these, committees or councils specific to generative AI and this new onset of technology. And 12 months ago, no hands went up. And now I think back to last week when I did it, right? 85–90% of the hands are going up. So, if you are not speaking with your clients about this new type of technology, understanding where they may need additional support, I would urge you to, and know that you've got great partners here who can be a resource to answer any of those questions and help guide your clients as they continue to navigate what is a very tumultuous time from a human capital management, data, technology perspective. So from a disclaimer perspective, like I said, it's not final words, not legal advice, a political opinion by any means. I'm going to share, obviously what we're seeing in the market from a human capital management data perspective. I think that if you think about your clients, you as an organization, and the amount of data that they leverage at the front end for how they drive profitability and revenues, right? Are we going to go into a new state, new market, new product, right? There's so much data that they leverage for how they drive revenues to their organization. And C-level executives especially understand the power of data, and they're now starting to understand the organizational ROI that human capital management data can have for them when leveraged appropriately. So I'm going to talk about just like high level, what's happening in the market from a data people analytics perspective. I'm going to share a little bit about just like ADP's innovation story. And as you think about like how we capture data points, how we aggregate, how we anonymize, and then ultimately the results our clients are seeing through being able to leverage our data, be able to benchmark themselves against their peers regionally and nationally to be able to understand where there's areas of opportunity or improvement. And then the last piece, I'll talk specifically to ADP Assist, which is our generative AI tool, and the specific use cases that a generative AI technology can have for the organization. And knowing that there's really a lot of opportunities, as people have mentioned this morning on our call, through ChatGPT. If you haven't gone into ChatGPT and tried to create a job description for a role that you're looking to hire, I urge you to do so. I think that there, from a security perspective, as you think about taking organizational data, personal data, ingesting that within ChatGPT, like I think that's where a lot of like the uncertainty may lie. But I urge you to jump in, lean in, and start to see right what it has the ability to be able to provide for you from a technological perspective, because there's a lot of cool things that it can do, and really again allows you to do things much more faster, much more effectively. You think about creating a job description. If I'm an HR executive going to create a job description, I'm probably going to go to one of my CPA firms and ask for support if they can help me in this initiative. My broker, my best friend in the industry, Google, right? It could take me a day and a half, 2 days to create a job description. With ChatGPT, you can create it within seconds. So that's just insane, right? Like again, how quickly it's going to allow us to do things and to work. So I always like to start off with a little bit of a pop quiz, if you will. And I think I didn't want to like spill the beans on the panel this morning, but I was going to kind of drop it in as people were talking about the use of ChatGPT. But as you think about applications that you have on your phone that you may have already used at some point throughout the day today, what was the fastest app to reach 100 million users? Fastest app to reach 100 million users. Throw it in the chat. And as we get just a couple of responses here, I'll kind of walk you through this. And I think this again just reinforces the need to educate, understand, and lean in, because technology is evolving so rapidly, and it's wild to see. So, not sure what people guessed, but obviously there's probably a couple of TikToks, Instagrams, Facebooks. But ChatGPT literally hit 100 million users in 2 months' time, and it's already been outpaced by Threads. So Threads is obviously a Meta-owned company. They had that large consumer base already. So, I'll really focus the time and effort there from a ChatGPT perspective. I think as Becca and I were talking about it earlier, like if you had expected me to understand what Airbnb, VRBO would mean today, 15, 20 years ago, I'd have told you like, you're absolutely nuts. Right? If you would have told me, if I think about Uber took about 70 months to eclipse 100 million users. I was probably like a month 150 adopter to Uber, random car, random person picking me up and taking me places. Like I just thought that was super bizarre. And now I don't know what I would do without Uber from a professional and a personal perspective. So we think a lot about all these tools and technologies. We think about how we interact with like chatbots on specific websites. And if you'd have thought 15, 20 years ago that would have ever been the case, like I told you that you're nuts, right? So again, the wait and see mentality, not necessarily the most sustainable for organizations. And it's just continuing to grow at such a rapid speed to start to get your arms around exactly what this has the ability to be able to do for an organization, I think is key. If you think about like last year, like 43% of professionals were already leveraging some type of generative AI or chat GPT related tool for work related tasks. And we only see that number continuing to increase. So again, it's growing so rapidly, so quickly, and start to get your arms around how it has the ability to be able to impact your role to allow you to really truly focus on those strategic aspects of your role and not get caught up in the tactical minutia that obviously technology and generative AI technology can handle on your behalf. So what about blueberries? So we're going to chat about blueberries today. And if you've got your ChatGPT app, by all means, feel free to open it up. And if you don't, download it. It's the perfect time of year to do this exercise. I did it this past weekend at a holiday get together, ugly Christmas, tacky Christmas sweater party. You're around family, friends. Download the ChatGPT app. And we're going to just talk about, as you think about generative AI, some of the most important aspects to any generative AI tool. Specificity in the initial prompt and the specificity and depth of the data that's driving the responsiveness of that tool based off of the initial inquiry, right? So we're going to just talk about exactly like what that means, and specific to ChatGPT, right? Like what we have the ability to be able to learn right through this little exercise here. So as I mentioned earlier, so I've been talking about it, right? We've talked about job description creation. We talk about what this technology has the ability to be able to do. It's going to allow us to do things much more faster, effectively, and at scale, right? So as you think about creating a response to an email that may take you a couple of minutes, and you could type that into ChatGPT with a couple of those key points that you want to ensure are part of that response, and it's going to create it for you within seconds. Like that just is crazy, right? How quickly it has the ability to be able to spit that information back to you. So let's talk about blueberries, and let's talk about ChatGPT, and let's talk about specificity and why that matters. So if you were to go into your ChatGPT app and type in where is the letter R in blueberry, you're going to get a couple of different responses. You're going to get some responses that say there is no letter R in the word blueberry. The letter R falls prior to the last letter in the word blueberry, which isn't wrong, but it's not 100% right, okay? And so if you want accurate response to that initial inquiry, you want to ensure that that initial prompt is very specific for what you're trying to get from a response perspective. And so when you get that, there is no R in the word blueberry, or that, that's called a hallucination. And so as you think about some of the potential risks in any type of generative AI technology, like obviously hallucinations would be one. Hallucinations are minimized with specificity in the prompt and a very deep and specific data set that's driving the responsiveness of that tool. So as you think about our solutions or any type of generative AI solutions, you really want to ensure that there's that human oversight and that we constantly just have these individuals who are massaging the models to ensure accuracy in the response, because that's ultimately what's most important for you all as the users. Minimizing bias and ethics, like obviously making sure that from a secure data privacy perspective, that, as you think about SOC compliance, as you think about ADP's overall approach to data integrity, security, disaster recovery, we have, full-time white glove hackers, right, who consistently are trying to, breach into our systems. Like, we have the same type of model and mentality as it pertains to generative AI. Like, we've created our own board. We had a transformation office, which was the office inside of ADP that really saw the future and said, hey, what potential new technology or new competitors that could potentially put ADP out of business? We completely changed the name of that office to the GAIN office, which is Gen AI now. What are we doing with Gen AI within our technology that our clients leverage, implementation, service, for our field sales and the technologies that they use to be able to make their lives much easier. And then that last piece is, again, secure, compliant, and private use of data, and ensuring, your aggregation processes, your anonymization processes are all in compliance, and there's, no risk, right, for any leakage or any of that data, right, being shared outside of our solutions. So you obviously probably at this point start to understand what a hallucination is. Hallucination is just not a 100% accurate response based off of that initial prompt. So now if I was to go back into ChatGPT and I was to ask ChatGPT to number the letters in the word blueberry and identify where the letters are fall, it will 100% get it right, because there was additional specificity in the prompt to ensure that I got a very accurate response. If you were to go in and type in, where is the letter R, put R in quotation marks in the word blueberry, right, you're also going to get a couple of different responses. So you have 3 different prompts that you can do that are kind of fun throughout the holidays to be able to help, like, yeah, there's going to be these hallucinations, and you minimize hallucinations by really ensuring that you've got, really good specificity in the initial prompt, and then a really specific and deep data set that's driving the responsiveness of that tool. So congratulations, you've all got new certifications. Not only do you get your CPA today, but you've got a new certification for Prompt Engineering 101, right? Like, that's basically how it goes down. So we talk about bias and ethics. Obviously, you're going to see a lot in the news, right, as far as technology companies who potentially had, issues with, again, I think about, some of the recruiting and the applicant tracking and not removing bias and not having specific applicants that get to recruiters and get to HR because there's a gap from a technology and a modeling perspective. So you're going to hear in the news about a lot of firms who may not necessarily have the right protocols and parameters in place from a technology perspective, and some of these issues that may arise. And it's going to continue to happen. And I think Todd hit it on this morning, like really ensuring that you think about like regulatory AI components, like that's obviously going to be something that in the future is going to be something that we just need to ensure that we keep up with and continue to educate, our clients and be a resource to be able to help them, navigate this, because it's going to be ever changing over the next, couple of quarters, next couple of months here. As you think about these individual committees and councils that you can create, right, you would obviously be thinking about, accurate data, safe, secure, private use of that data, and a few of these AI governing principles that, again, as I mentioned, like start to think about like how you could start to chip away at this massive beast of generative AI. And that's obviously going to know that, hey, again, it can do a really good job of notifying you of the good and the not so good that's happening within your organization. So for instance, one of our use cases is, without anyone having to kickstart a process, without anyone having to jump into reporting or jump into their dashboards, ADP Assist can proactively notify those HR practitioners when turnover is higher one month in comparison to the last, or if you have those metrics calendarized from a year over year perspective, right? So without anyone having to dive into reports or anyone having to open up their analytics tool or their dashboard, ADP Assist can proactively notify without anyone having to kickstart that process of the good and the maybe not so good that's happening within the organization. So it can notify, but it can never take action. And so there's always the human oversight. And that's obviously, as I mentioned earlier, it's never going to take away from the human touch. You want to ensure that you're mitigating bias, that there's transparency and explainability. There's the operational monitoring. You have those individuals who are continuing to massage the models, oversee, right, all of the responses and the depth and specificity of the data that's driving the responses. Start to create the culture, making it cultural. I think a lot about, I think it was on the panel this morning, somebody may have mentioned this. So I was on a panel not too long ago, and they were talking about Gen AI policies and updating handbooks. And obviously, that's going to be really, really important. We were also talking earlier about hiring some of these younger professionals coming out of college into the accounting industry or into, any type of industry that you're in. And there are still, believe it or not, companies that are out there that, as you think about how you acquire talent, don't have a link, a landing page, right, that's driving them to a very automated process to apply for a position. If you are still one that has upload your resume or send an email and you're looking to acquire or attract a younger, very technologically savvy individual that's just exiting college, you're never going to see that person because that individual is never going to send an email and attach their resume to apply for a position. They want to do something that's very quick, easy, that has very good transparency and explainability of like, what is that salary range for that specific position? What are the roles, responsibilities, and the job description for that position? They want to see all of that before they talk with any of your recruiters or any of the people in HR, and they want a very easy way to be able to enter into your applicant pool. So as you think about just again, like these are some of the pieces that I'm thinking about as I think about identifying, acquiring like a younger group of individuals that are coming into the workforce because the baby boomers are exiting at such a rapid rate, right? There's always going to be opportunities to be able to backfill with these individuals who come with a very like technologically savvy background. Last thing I'd say is like make it inclusive, continue to upskill, continue to reskill and train the employees within your organization. So at the end of the day, we're not having to worry about blueberries or raspberries, and we can get on into 2025 and have a lot of positive experience with our data analytics and also any type of generative AI solution. So quick little exercise. Hopefully you got a chance to do that over the holidays with some family and friends. But I think as we transition into more like from a market standpoint, like from a personal perspective, we've been leveraging AI for such a long time. And now this emphasis on how we can leverage AI from a professional perspective, right, is really coming to fruition. And so I think about, a specific story for, my wife when we moved. We've been in Nashville, Tennessee for about 4 years now. And she works at one of the local health systems, and she has to go to a couple of different locations throughout the week. So on Monday, she goes to a West Nashville location. On Tuesday, she's downtown on campus in Nashville. On Wednesday and Thursday, she takes my daughter to school. And on Friday, she has to go to the Franklin, Tennessee location. So after a couple of weeks of being here and going through the same schedule day in and day out, she came home at the end of the day one day and she said, it was so crazy. I went into my car this morning, I plugged in my Apple CarPlay, and my Apple Maps automatically popped up, taking me to the West Nashville location. Like, that's crazy. I'm like, that's artificial intelligence. That's pattern recognition. That's like an NLP that's starting to understand and start to work on your behalf because it's starting to recognize what the pattern looks like and just removing a step, right, for you. But by putting that up there and having that Apple Maps already go into that one specific location, it removed one step that you had to take every single morning. And there's always the human oversight. So if Monday morning it was scheduled to take you to West Nashville and you need to take my daughter to school because I had to jump on a call early in the morning, like you have the ability to be able to course correct and ensure that you're actually going to where you need to go. But again, it's just like that pattern recognition is something that from a personal perspective, we've seen for such a long time. And now we're going to start to see the benefits of it from a professional perspective. This slide is a hot mess for a reason. It's intentional. Every technology firm that's out there right now is touting and talking about either what they're building on their own or who they're partnering with for their generative AI story or solution that's going to ultimately benefit their clientele. And so, again, as you think about, these are all press releases that come from a lot of our competitors, other technology firms that are out there. And it's meant to be this, to create some urgency that, again, as you think about like the technologies that you use, right, they're all starting to incorporate some type of generative AI solution into what they're doing. And as I mentioned, really what you want to ensure is you think about any type of solution or technology that has this Gen AI solution built in. It's just like helping to understand exactly like the amount of data and how specific it is to the response that you're looking to get. And that's ultimately going to be a big aspect of this is depth and specificity of the response that you're looking to get through the solution that you're leveraging this technology for. This is an interesting survey. So, we obviously test the market, the pulse, and really get an understanding of, whether it's our clients or, our prospects in the mid-market, like what for them is most top of mind. And so this specific study was going out to about 500 groups in the mid-market space, 250 were our clients, 250 were our prospects, to really get an understanding of where they felt like generative AI was going to have the biggest impact on the multiple aspects of human capital management. So we're going to focus our time and efforts on like the left-hand side of this slide. So as you see, there's, obviously buckets, HR, recruiting, payroll, benefits, onboarding, et cetera. In this middle market space, that 599 space, I thought it was really interesting when, only 24% of respondents felt like generative AI could have an impact on learning. And that's one of our biggest use cases. So with learning, and as you think about any of the solutions and data that you have from a human capital management perspective, we can recommend specific courses through a generative AI solution without anyone in learning or HR having to kickstart that process. So as you think about, yourselves on your career path, and you think about succession planning and how it ties into performance, and how if you think about an employee profile, it's always going to know what licenses and certifications, experience you currently have. What are courses that you've already completed based off of your role in our learning management solution? And then what are you doing from a performance perspective? What is your succession plan within our organization? And allowing the generative AI technology to recommend specific courses for you to be able to complete as an employee to keep you engaged in your role. So it ultimately help from a retention perspective without anyone in learning having to kickstart that process. Based off your role, courses you completed, licensing and certification, it can recommend specific courses for you to continue to take. So it's only going to keep you engaged, right, and keep you as a high productive employee within our organization. So I share that to say that I think there's, again, right, continued education on what the outcomes with the right generative AI solution can be for the organization. And again, one aspect we're just like, hey, I don't really understand how like there's generative AI solutions capabilities with our learning management system. But then as you start to understand, like, okay, that makes sense, right? Like obviously I can continue to push courses to make sure that this employee sees like what that next step is going to be from a career perspective within our organization. So as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of uncertainty, totally understand it. On the right-hand side, these specific statistics came from a Gartner study. So 60% of HR leaders, finance professionals like yourself, uncertain about the impact that generative AI can have on, HR, talent, attraction trends. But they also know of the 76% saying that if they don't implement something in the next 12 to 24 months, right, they could find themselves, right, a little lagging. Like I think a lot about like fast casual and a lot of organizations who can leverage data at the front end to understand surge time, peak time, scheduling individuals that they need to have within the organization. If you have your peers, right, who are starting to lean into this type of technology, put those policy procedures in place and starting to see the benefits, and you're not, right, like there's no doubt that there's going to be a little bit of that FOMO, if you will, and those peers that may be, outpacing you because they're allowing this solution, this technology to provide them the insights and the data as to what's happening, right? With, whether it's at the front end for how they drive revenues and profitabilities, or it's at the back end for their human capital management data, and really understanding like, hey, why do I turn over more than my industry peers regionally and nationally? and allowing the solution and the technology to, proactively notify me, right, instead of having to dive into those reports. So we'll talk about, the benchmarking aspect to human capital data, and, being able to start to understand, like, how do you compare? And, it's nice to have those analytics and the dashboards of, what's happening within your organization. But as you think about really starting to understand, like, your, competition, and, how they are doing within their specific human capital management aspects, and where you stack up, and where the opportunity is to improve, is obviously something that we have the ability to be able to support in those efforts too. So a lot of uncertainty and a lot of reinforcement. So this specific survey came from Eightfold AI, which is a generative AI, first generation generative AI organization in the HR outsourcing space. So 92% of leaders intend to increase their use in Gen AI in one of these areas. So obviously removing biases. I think about benefit automation. You think about decision support. So we have tools within our benefit enrollment solution which allow an individual who may be home enrolling in benefits on a weekend with their spouse to be able to ask specific questions based off of their age and based off of the makeup of the family, and what plan may be the most cost effective, but is still going to get them the type of coverage that they need, right? I think about recruitment, and we mentioned profile relevancy and candidate relevancy. Those are generative AI solutions that really ensure that recruiters and HR are focusing their time and efforts on, those individuals coming in through the applicant funnel who on paper look most like the high potential employees that they currently have within the organization, and being able to have the insights into where we're acquiring our best people from, and really focusing our time and efforts, right, on those specific sites to continue to acquire, right, the best people. So again, no doubt, and you think about the use cases that these are going to impact in a positive way, right? And so we're going to talk a little bit more about the use cases and exactly what that means. I wanted to transition really quickly over to pay. I mentioned this earlier, pay transparency, and I'll talk a little bit about exactly what that is, because I'm assuming you probably have clients that you're working with that are located in these specific states where pay transparency, compliance, and laws are in place, and your clients have to have, as a part of that initial requisition that they push out to Monster and Indeed Career Builder, what is the salary range for that specific position that they're looking to hire? And so as you think about those states, right, the Pacific Northwest, California, Colorado, Illinois just adopted it. Minnesota goes live in January, and the Northeast, New York, New Jersey, big into pay transparency. I was recently in Texas with 250 of our clients, and there's some specific studies that do talk to, like, I'm like, why, what are you missing out on by not putting that salary range out there for a specific position? Like, why would you not want to put your best foot forward? Well, it's really hard to do that if you don't have any type of compensation benchmarking tool to understand what pay should look like for these specific roles before you put that salary range out there. And this is a Harvard Business Review, fairly reputable source. You've probably heard of them before. Well, they came to ADP and they said, like, hey, we want to understand over a 3-year period, like the cause and effect before and after organizations have access to compensation benchmarking. Long and short of it is, organizations who have access to compensation benchmarking attract faster, they retain better, and they avoid market overpay by ensuring accuracy in that compensation benchmark. There's a specific, like, example in the article that talks to an organization in New Jersey, and they hire 100 truck drivers every year. They were offering those truck drivers $52,000 base salary in the initial offer until they had access to the benchmark, and the benchmark said you could offer those same truck drivers $50,000. So they started offering $50,000 instead of 52. 100 truck drivers, $2,000 in savings, because they were able to acquire the talent just as quickly, offering 50 instead of 52. So there's $200,000 in savings back to the organization, which gave them the ability to be able to offer merit faster, right? They were able to offer stay bonuses, retention bonuses. So again, long and short of it, organizations who leverage comp benchmarking attract faster, retain better, and save money, right, by avoiding the market overpay. If you're headquartered in Maryland and you're looking to open new brick and mortar, you're going into new geographies and you have a, specific role as a laborer in the state of Maryland that you've been paying, in a specific geographic pocket in the state of Maryland that you've been paying, and you now are looking at going into Missouri or to Colorado or into Texas, the pay is going to look different. And to be able to understand exactly what that pay looks like for that specific role is ultimately going to drive the organizational ROI and be beneficial to ensuring accuracy and how quickly, right, you can acquire the talent. Like there's a lot of correlation in time to fill, right, to the compensation and that salary survey, that benchmark that's a part of, that specific requisition. So for those that don't necessarily understand pay transparency, a little bit of a, example study here. So this woman was working as a 1099 New York City company. She sees, because in New York, you have to have that salary range as a part of the requisition, that her company that she's working for as a 1099 is hiring a W-2 position doing exactly the same job and offering $60,000 more, right, in a base salary. So she applies for the job, she gets the job, right? All well and good. That's the benefits of pay transparency. It's an interesting study that came from HR executives. It was about a year ago, but this was from a Gartner article. 44% of applicants won't even apply to the position if there's no salary range as a part of that initial requisition. So again, think about the type of talent that we're looking to acquire. Individuals who may be coming out of college, very technologically savvy, want a very low barrier of entry when they're looking to apply for a position. Make sure that that salary range is a part of the requisition and make sure it's an easy process. Or again, you're never going to see them. If you don't have the salary range up there, they're just going to walk right past that rec. If you don't have an easy way for them to apply for the position, right, they're going to walk right past that rec and go on to the next company. That makes it very easy and seamless because they all got the resumes on their phone now, right? So as you think about LinkedIn, you think about Indeed and Monster and Zip, right, their ability to be able to just sit there at night and fire off applications to position for jobs, it makes it easy for them because they've got it all built out because they've been doing this, right, for the last 10 to 15 years. These are most my 13-year-old and 10-year-old are probably way more technologically savvy than myself. And that's okay. I don't necessarily need to go down that rabbit hole. But again, that's the type of candidate that you're looking to acquire. You got to meet them where they are. So pay is huge. Access to transparency around compensation, like ADP, we pay 1 in 5, 1 in 6 in the private space. We are the pulse on compensation in the market because all of our data is employer reported. As you think about your salary.coms, your Lattice, your PayScale, PayFactor, your Aons, your Radfords, that can be employee reported because it's coming from a specific survey, right? And depending on how accurate and how recent that data is, that's obviously those questions that you want to ensure that you're asking, right, to really get a pulse of what's happening right now with pay in the market. So jumping into a little bit about ADP as a whole and the innovation approach that we take, I think about our competitors, and I think back 5-10 years ago, there was always this you go to ADP, you're this tiny fish in this massive ocean of clients, and it was always something that they used against us. Well, now if anybody understands NLPs, large language models, and artificial intelligence, they understand that our size is now our power position because of the amount of clients and the amount of data that we have is what drives the insights that we have the ability to be able to provide to our clients. It's a very keep it simple, stupid type of mentality. Make it easy, make it smart, and make it human. So as you think about this bottom rung on our pyramid here for transactions, every unique click that happens within our human capital management solution is a data point that we aggregate. Every onboarding exercise, every requisition that gets pushed out to Monster or Indeed, every payroll that's processed, every performance review, every learning management course that's completed, right? For the interest of time in this example, let's think about terminations as a transaction, right, on this bottom row, termination transactions. So last year, we saw over 12 million termination transactions. So our data scientist team aggregate all of those unique reasons for terms, stack rank them, and that's what we build into our predictive models to be able to proactively identify and help our clients know who are potential employees who could be at risk of exiting our organization based off of the data and the pattern recognition of the terminations that we've already seen. So who isn't compensated necessarily well in comparison to the benchmark? When was the last time an individual received a promotion? When's the last time an individual received a merit increase? So if this is the reason for why they're leaving an organization, we find that it's really relevant to provide that insight to our clients to be able to help them understand, like, hey, who are current employees within an organization who, based off of these benchmarks, may be at risk to exit because they're not compensated fairly enough, or they're not receiving the proper amount of labor or overtime hours, or they're commuting too far to the office. So all of those unique transactions that we see because of our size, right? We're paying 42 million records globally. We have 1.2 million clients. We have 26 million individuals that we're paying here domestically. So all of those data points is what drives the insight that we have the ability to be able to provide to our clients. And the last piece is making it human. So really ensuring that each individual across the enterprise is going to interact differently with the technology. If I'm a candidate employee, I just need to see my information, my pay information, my talent information, my benefit information. If I'm a practitioner, right, I need to obviously see everything across the workforce. If I'm a manager, supervisor, I need to see my information personally, but also my team's information, scheduling, who's approaching overtime, being able to move some individuals around to ensure that we're not paying out a lot from an overtime perspective. So, each individual across the enterprise interacts with our solutions, our generative AI solutions like ADP Assist, our human capital management solutions within Workforce Now differently based off of the data that they actually need to see. So a little bit of the insight as to, as you think about future data innovation with ADP, like it really drives from the amount of those unique clicks that we capture, right, from a client perspective. As far as the data as a whole and where our clients are absolutely leveraging our data the most, labor analytics, we just talked around compensation, benchmarking, surge time, scheduling, demand forecasting. So as you think about the private equity space, they obviously love the ADP data to be able to identify as they go into new markets and look into new products, what does the pulse of pay look like in those respective areas and those respective industries. And our real estates, so our large retailers identifying, hey, where's the next location that we're going to go? If I am a higher end retailer and I'm looking at opening up a new brick and mortar, right, I want to ensure that if I am a, Gucci or something like that, and I'm going to go open up a new location, I want to make sure that, individuals in that median household income, 30 to 40-mile radius of that new location, has the ability and the dollars and cents to be able to come into my store and purchase my goods. So that's where a lot of our clients leverage our data to be able to understand, like, strategically 5-6 year plan, what that next step is, next move, and be able to plan accordingly based off of what that pulse of pay looks like in those respective areas. As far as the data itself, we're now upwards of 42 million records. We're paying 1 in 5 in the private space. We've got 1.2 million clients. We move upwards of $3 trillion on behalf of our clients, and upwards of 80% now of Fortune 500 companies are leveraging us for at least one of our solutions, whether it's full-blown human capital management or standalone work opportunity tax credits, right? We've got over 1,000 industries that we pay. Some of our industry-specific benchmarks will have more data within an industry-specific benchmark than a competitor has in total client records across all industry types. And for those in the throes and understanding data, they understand that, like, the specificity in the data is obviously what's going to resonate and what's most important to the C-level executives. Help me understand what my competitors and peers and how they are performing in these specific buckets from a human capital management perspective. The data, it's granular, it's real, it's specific, it's the most real time on the market. It takes us about 30 days to aggregate and anonymize and package. And all the data that we provide to our clients is based off of individuals that were paid by ADP 30 days ago. Right? So it's not survey data, it's not stale, it's not stagnant, inflated, right? It's all based off of the employees, the W-2, what do they make in salary versus commission versus bonus versus equity, et cetera. Right? So a lot of great data, 9,000 plus different job descriptions that we have within our tool. And these are the results that our clients are seeing through actually leveraging our analytics and our benchmarks. So this is a client claim assessment in key buckets in human capital management space. So as you think about finding and attracting top talent, 50% of our analytics users are reducing their time to hire by 27 days or more. I've seen some roles that are 180, 190 days to fill. So moving the needle 27 days means a lot to an organization to be able to acquire talent faster than their peers. As I mentioned earlier, the profile relevancy, the candidate relevancy, casting a really, really wide net and ensuring we're providing the insight to our clients on where they're acquiring their best people is how they're starting to move the needle, right, on those days to hire. Employee retention. So this is a big one, turnover. So not only do ADP clients have the ability to be able to identify what the cost to replace every employee type across the enterprise is based off of what you pay out in severance, what the cost to recruit that individual was, what the cost to train that individual was, and what you lost in productivity. Those are the four key metrics that we have identified as well, what help our clients understand should they lose an individual across the enterprise, what is the cost to replace that individual should they exit? Because if you have someone that leaves, right, you've got to dump that cost to recruit in them, dump the cost to train into those individuals, right? And like kind of like the vicious cycle continues. So not only can we help them identify what the cost to replace those individuals are, but we can also help them identify who are current employees that based off of the fact that ADP saw 12 million termination transactions last year, and we have all those predictors that are built into our models, we can identify who are current employees who may be at risk to leave. And if you want to keep them, right, here's what you need to do. You need to right size this individual from a compensation standpoint. You need to talk to this individual about a merit increase, a promotion, so they can start to see their path across the organization from a succession planning perspective. So again, like our clients are reducing voluntary turnover costs by 20% or more because they know what the cost to replace is. It puts additional efforts and onus around retention strategies in HR. And they also know those current employees who may be at risk to leave because, again, like you see 12 million termination transactions, we have a pretty good understanding as to the why and when an individual may be looking to exit the organization. And if you want to keep them, here's what you need to do in order to do so. Improving DE&I, pay equity, obviously a big national just focus from a lot of organizations. It's the easiest storyboard we have within ADP. Here's what the national benchmarks say specific to your industry, specific to this geography from a DE&I equity perspective. Here's where you are. Here's the dollars and cents it would take for you to invest to be able to bridge that gap. If you don't have that full amount, that's okay. We can actually allocate a specific budget and disperse that across those individuals who need to be right-sized. So pay equity, DE&I, obviously a big play for a lot of organizations. And then the last one, optimization of labor costs. 55% of our analytics users reducing overtime costs on average by 30% or more. So again, like these are real results through our client claims assessment that our clients are seeing through able to leverage the data, compare themselves to their peers, and be able to actually take action on the good and maybe not so good that's happening within their organization. I always share this from a specific client of ours. As you think about compensation benchmarking, ensuring accuracy there, like this is a great story. Like the literal savings that they received was enough for the annual salary of all of their HR team, which is a really insane, crazy ROI to ensure that you've got accuracy in all of the specific roles and individuals that you're paying in all the states that you're located in. So let's get into ADP Assist. So as I mentioned earlier, ADP Assist is our generative AI solution. We partner with OpenAI and also a firm called Gnome from the modeling perspective, right, for the Gen AI models. As far as like the human capital models and the data embedded within these tools, it's all ADP data, right? So all of the 42 million records and the 1.2 million clients and all of the historical structured and unstructured data is what is driving the responsiveness of ADP Assist. And it's a generative AI solution that overlays all of the products you have within your human capital management solution. So payroll, HR, time, benefits, performance, learning, et cetera. And there's three specific use cases that can assist our clients in identifying what's happening within the organization. As I mentioned earlier, right, we're obviously going to create a unique experience with ADP Assist based off of the individual's role within the organization. I'm a manager, I'm an employee versus a practitioner. So there's three specific use cases. There's a predictive aspect to this. I mentioned the learning management side of things a few minutes ago. Think about from a tax perspective. I'm headquartered here in Nashville, Tennessee. I may have some remote employees. I have an employee who moves into a state where I'm not currently set up with tax IDs. As soon as that individual changes within their employee profile, their address, and ADP Assist identifies that they're living within a state where you're not currently set up with tax IDs, ADP Assist will notify the practitioner that you have an employee in a state not currently set up from a tax perspective and step-by-step walk you through how to acquire that ID so that from a compliance perspective, you're in a good spot. Without anyone in HR, finance having to know that that individual left, ADP Assist is going to proactively notify and walk you through how to acquire that ID so that you're in a good spot. Think about payroll anomalies. as you think about payroll previews and taking a look at pay and really looking at the line items, the gross to net breakdowns, right? Any of those major anomalies, any of those changes that transpire throughout that pay period, like we're going to proactively notify the practitioner so they understand what's happening. And so sometimes if you think about like a standard biweekly payroll, it's probably very similar based off of salary versus hourly folks. You all of a sudden go run a Christmas bonus or a commissions, and it's obviously going to be much higher than your standard biweekly pay period. Like it's going to notify you, but there's always the human oversight for you to say, no, this is a commissions. I'm going to go ahead and process this payroll so I can get my people paid. Right. So there's the predictive side to ADP Assist. Think about all those pesky locals in PA and Ohio, right? And not ensuring and making sure that, again, you have someone kind of like over your shoulder, keeping you abreast and keeping you up to date on what's happening, right, across the organization. Intuitive context-based nudging. This is going to be big as you think about employees. They forget to clock out at the end of the day. Boom, they're going to get notified to go in and make sure that they complete their time card. They go in and they clock out. Open enrollment. You have employees who still haven't completed open enrollment. They need to make sure that it's done by a specific certain time, right? It's going to notify that individual, right, through their text, through their mobile app, so that, again, no one's having to kickstart that process, but you can ensure, right, that the amount of times that they're getting pinged, like they're going to go in, they're going to complete what they need to complete. A manager, supervisor, overriding exceptions at the end of a pay period, right? They're going to continue to get those notifications so that they go and clean up so we can close payroll and actually get it processed. And then the last piece, I think with ADP Assist, there's a lot of individuals that are still out there that, like I said, are uncertain about data, uncertain about Gen AI. And sometimes I think they push data off as unimportant because they don't necessarily understand like what it has the ability to be able to provide the organization. And so I think with ADP Assist, we really built a tool that allowed us to meet an individual regardless of where they are on their data journey. Like if they're super savvy data savants, they obviously know the dashboards and analytics that they want to have to be able to see the data that's pertinent to them. But we also create an environment where if you're not the most data savvy, they can go click on a question bank and get a response. They can type in a question and get a response. And we ultimately help kind of provide that feedback to the practitioner on the specific questions so we don't have that blueberry raspberry issue like we had a few slides back. So ensuring that there's that specificity in the prompt, because when we're building that question bank, right, we have control of like the specificity of the prompt and the question that's being asked. And we know that we have a very deep and very specific data set that's driving the responsiveness of the tool. So as you think about, right, as I mentioned earlier, like specificity in the prompt and a very deep and specific data set that's driving the responsiveness. You think about the structured data, which is data we could pull out of a financial ERP or out of a CRM or out of a human capital management solution. That's all that structured data. Unstructured data could be a Word document, could be a call log, could be a text, an image, or Excel file, right? We aggregate all of that structured and unstructured data, and that is what's driving the responsiveness of ADP Assist. And as you think about human capital management data and you think about ADP, like there's not a lot that we haven't seen, right? With the amount of countries that we're in, with the amount of jurisdictions and states that we're in, the amount of individuals that we're paying, right? So we have a really good pulse and understanding and ensuring accuracy in the responsiveness of that tool. As far as the specific use cases, I know we're getting close on time here. So our analytics assist, as you think about the ability to be able to go in and type in a question as far as what is my turnover by department, and being able to get a very nice and easy to view like graphical display that you can share with those individuals that you need to. So as you think about, C-level executive walks in and says like, hey, when's the last time Rebecca got a pay increase? You could literally go into ADP Assist and type that in and be able to get a response within seconds. If not, you'd have to log into Workforce Now, you'd have to go to employee profile, you'd have to go into salary updates, right? So it may take you a couple of minutes. With this, you can type in a question and get a response, even down to the employee level within seconds. So this is obviously going to help reduce time and ensure you're focusing your efforts where they need to be. Tax registration, I mentioned this, brings those missing tax IDs to the surface, notifies the practitioners, and allows them to take action, right? Proactive notification, allowing our clients to take action on the good and the not so good that's happening within the organization. Payroll exception handling, as I mentioned this earlier, being able to see who's missing a punch still, who hasn't had a chance to update it, go in and override those exceptions. So we're going to continue to drive that awareness to those individuals. Job description creator, I talked about this one earlier on. One of the use cases that we're building right now, which I think is probably one of like the coolest ones. If you aren't familiar with it, Enhanced workflows is a topic in human capital management that very recently is kind of like at the forefront, and that's ensuring that there's connectivity to some of those other tools and technologies that are a part of the employee lifecycle that maybe sit outside of your HRIS payroll benefit solution. This may be employee gifting. So as you think about new employees when they get hired and they come on and you have some type of like welcome kit for those individuals, you may have a technology for that. If you think about your IT folks, they're getting a laptop, they're getting key fob, they're getting a cell phone, like the company property. So enhanced workflows and ADP Assist, one of the use cases that we're building is you can imagine all the connectivity from other tools and technologies and individuals who need to be notified about specific happenings from an employee management perspective. Let's just think about terminations. With one click of a button, we're going to terminate an employee. We're going to communicate that termination to all of the individuals and all the technologies so that they can start to handle, right, those steps that they need to do to terminate and offboard this specific employee. While at the same time, we've created the requisition to hire and we've put the compensation benchmark in based off of the specific role and pushed the requisition out to those monsters and deeds, career builders, to be able to start the requisition to hire process with one click of a button. So like, as you think about all the steps that go into a termination and all the steps that go into requisition to hire, and being able to do that all with one button because of connectivity from a technology and the generative AI technology that's driving it behind it, like that's game-changing type stuff. That's ultimately going to make our clients and lives of those individuals within HR finance much more productive. But you think about it from a mobile perspective, it's all mobile enabled. Employees literally have the ability to be able to go in through ADP Assist on their cell phone, ask specific questions through Siri to be able to identify what type of benefit plan they have. Do they have dental, right? On the fly, be able to get information out that's specific and pertinent to them as an employee. As again, the ability to be able to just go in and be able to chat back and forth with ADP Assist. It's going to reduce the amount of questions that come to HR. Think about those individuals who come in and ask how much PTO they have, right? What do they need to do in order to request time off or vacation? Like they now have the ability to be able to ask all of those more tactical HR questions through ADP Assist so that you obviously are going to focus more of your time and efforts on the actual strategic areas of your role and interactions with your employees, which ultimately is going to drive culture, which is going to drive productivity, which ultimately ties and drives to the profitability of those individuals in their specific roles. So that is the last slide that I have. Obviously wanted to talk through those use cases. Sorry, I'm like having like a technology breakdown here. Sorry about that. But Rebecca, I don't know if there was any specific questions within the chat, or if there's any, thing that I could support and help answer here at the end of the break.
I didn't see any specific questions that came through Conferences.io. I think you did a fantastic job overview of some of the really cool, powerful things of Gen AI, and then how these two worlds of technology and data and talent really can come together for some really great insights and business strategy, right, is what it comes down to. So thank you so much, Max. We'll be ending this session. I believe you go back, our audience goes back into the lobby where they can join the next session. We have a couple-minute break, and we will see you there in the next session. I believe we'll be joined by Aon talking about some of the risk environment and what we need to think about in terms of coverage in this fast-changing world. So thanks so much, Max, again. We look forward to talking to you another time, and we'll see the rest of the audience in the next session.